The old church clock struck noon as thick snowflakes drifted gently through the bright winter sky, but one lonely father stood frozen outside the café, staring at the tiny Christmas gift in his trembling hands. His shoes were soaked from walking across town after his old pickup broke down, his coat was worn thin against the December chill, and every passing minute convinced him that the woman waiting inside had already given up. He had almost turned around 3 times, believing no successful woman would wait for someone like him. Yet this Christmas Eve was about to prove that the greatest miracles rarely arrive on time, they arrive exactly when hearts are ready for them. Before we continue, if you believe kindness can change lives and that everyone deserves a second chance, please like this video, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, share this story with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to Heartwarming Tales for more unforgettable stories that warm the heart. Elias Harper had never imagined that life could become so quiet after losing everything. 3 years earlier, he had owned a small family construction business, a modest home, and dreams that seemed impossible to break. Then tragedy struck in the middle of one ordinary winter. His beloved wife passed away after a sudden illness, leaving him to raise their 5-year-old daughter, Hazel, completely alone. Medical bills swallowed their savings, the business collapsed, and creditors took nearly everything he had worked for. What remained was an aging pickup truck, a tiny rented apartment, and a promise he whispered every night beside Hazel's bed that somehow tomorrow would be better. Every morning before sunrise, Elias delivered bakery supplies across the city. During the afternoons he repaired fences, shoveled snow, and accepted any small job that helped pay rent. His hands were rough, his back constantly ached, and exhaustion followed him everywhere. Yet every evening, when Hazel smiled and wrapped her little arms around his neck, he remembered why giving up was never an option. She believed her father could fix anything. He could not bear to disappoint the only person who still looked at him like a hero. Across the city, Rowan Sinclair lived a completely different life. At 38, she had become one of the youngest CEOs in the region after transforming a struggling technology company into an international success. Newspapers praised her achievements, business magazines admired her determination, and investors competed for her attention. Yet behind the polished image was a woman who returned each evening to a silent penthouse filled with expensive furniture but very little happiness. Success had brought recognition, but it had quietly taken away trust. Too many people admired her wealth instead of her heart. One December afternoon, Rowan's elderly assistant convinced her to try something completely different. Instead of another formal networking event or luxury holiday gala, she signed up anonymously for a charity-sponsored blind date designed to connect single parents and professionals who had dedicated too much of life to work. She almost canceled several times, but something inside her whispered that Christmas was about hope, not routine. Meanwhile, Elias had never intended to participate. A neighbor secretly submitted his name after seeing how lonely he had become. At first he laughed at the invitation, convinced it had been sent by mistake. Then Hazel carefully folded the invitation and slipped it into his pocket, telling him that Mommy would want him to smile again. Those simple words stayed with him. Christmas Eve arrived bright and clear. Sunlight reflected brilliantly across fresh snow, making the entire town sparkle beneath a crisp blue sky. Elias finished his final delivery just as disaster struck. His old pickup coughed violently before rolling to a stop on a quiet road nearly 5 miles from the cafe. Every attempt to restart the engine failed. He checked his nearly empty wallet and realized he could not afford a taxi. Looking toward the distant skyline, he tightened his worn scarf and began walking. Each step through the snow felt heavier than the last. The carefully wrapped wooden ornament he had carved himself remained safely tucked inside his coat. It was simple, imperfect, and worth almost nothing in money, yet it represented hours of work completed late at night after Hazel had fallen asleep. He hoped that whoever met him would at least understand the effort behind it. Inside the cafe, Rowan glanced repeatedly toward the entrance. The staff politely suggested that perhaps her date was not coming after all. Other couples laughed over warm drinks while Christmas music filled the room. 40 minutes passed. Then 50. Even so, something prevented her from leaving. She remembered how often people had judged situations before knowing the full story. She ordered another cup of coffee and quietly waited. Nearly an hour late, Elias finally reached the cafe, breathing heavily from the long walk. Snow covered his boots, his hair, and the shoulders of his faded coat. Embarrassment flooded his face before he even stepped inside. He expected disappointment. Instead, Rowan stood up with a gentle smile that immediately eased the weight he had been carrying all morning. She noticed his frozen hands before she noticed his appearance. She listened before making assumptions. And when he apologized for being late, explaining about the broken truck, she simply thanked him for making the effort to come. The afternoon unfolded with surprising ease. Elias spoke honestly about raising Hazel, rebuilding life one day at a time, and learning that strength often meant continuing despite fear. Rowan admitted that boardrooms had taught her strategy but not companionship. They laughed over small childhood memories, shared stories about Christmas traditions, and discovered that the most meaningful conversations rarely required impressive words. Before they left, Elias shyly offered the handmade ornament. Rowan held it carefully, tracing the carved snowflake with her fingertips. It was unlike any expensive gift she had ever received because every small imperfection revealed the love and patience poured into creating it. In return, she handed him a simple Christmas card containing nothing more than a handwritten message reminding him never to underestimate his own worth. Weeks passed after Christmas, but they continued meeting. Rowan visited the neighborhood where Elias lived, not out of curiosity but because she genuinely wanted to know the life he never tried to hide. She met Hazel, who immediately insisted on showing her every drawing hanging proudly on the apartment wall. Watching father and daughter together revealed more about Elias than any resume or achievement ever could. When Rowan eventually learned about Elias's experience managing construction projects before losing his business, she saw talent that hardship had never erased. Instead of offering charity, she invited him to oversee community housing projects funded by her company's charitable foundation. She believed opportunity should restore dignity, not create dependence. Elias accepted only after realizing he had earned the position through ability rather than sympathy. Months later, families moved into beautiful affordable homes built under Elias's leadership. The same hands that once struggled simply to survive were now creating places where other parents and children could begin again. Rowan often visited construction sites, not because she needed updates, but because she admired the quiet determination that had first walked through that cafe door covered in snow. As another Christmas approached, the same cafe decorated its windows once more. This time Elias arrived early, holding Hazel's hand while Rowan walked toward them beneath the bright afternoon sky. No one watching them would have guessed how differently that first meeting could have ended if either of them had surrendered to impatience. If this story has touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs encouragement, subscribe to Heartwarming Tales, and leave a comment telling us whether you believe love recognizes character before circumstance. Special request: comment below with the words "Kindness always waits" if you believe that the greatest blessings often arrive after the longest journeys. As Christmas lights quietly reflected across the snowy streets beneath the warm daylight, Elias realized that arriving late had never been his greatest fear. The real miracle was discovering someone who understood that the best people are worth waiting for, because love is measured not by perfect timing, but by patient hearts willing to believe in second chances.